Welcome to CodeCraft. Today we'll be taking a dive at building pokeapi. Essentially, we'll be wrapping around this pokeapi and we'll be building an API based on Express. We're going to push the data into Postgres DB. Okay, without further ado, here we go. Pokeapi. We can find that from pokeapi.co. So this is the landing page currently in 2024. So if you come down, this is where you can make all the requests. Essentially, you can switch between these different calls that have been highlighted as links. When you click on it, you get the response here. For example, if I come and pick everything here, you'll get to see that we've got an array of results here, but it also includes count, next, previous. So if I expand it, I can actually come down and see all of these. Essentially, each element has a name and a URL. So this is the name of the Pokemon, and then the URL essentially gives us extra properties. For example, if we come to detour, these are the extra properties that you get from that URL. But we'll get to this in a bit. So, essentially, these are the two endpoints that we want to wrap around. We'll grab the data from this one, which will give us an array of all of the Pokemon, and then we'll then switch over to the specific one using the URL. We'll see all of this as we build this system. So for now, that is what we need to know. The other thing is, essentially, there are two parts to it. The first one is where we get the data. So we'll first go and grab the full array with the name and URL for all of the Pokemon. Then we'll go individually and get the details, right, for each of those. And then for essentially all of them, we're going to store them in this cards model. We'll show you what this is in a moment. And then for the details, we're going to store them in the card details model. Afterwards, this is how we output. We're going to output everything using, essentially, we're going to build one endpoint. We might actually build the second one, but essentially it's going to just be one endpoint that gets the cards. We might do pagination and things like that. We'll keep it simple for quick start. Hopefully we'll get it done in a few. Right. What are we using? We're using Visual Studio. So Visual Studio Code is very much a powerful thing in dev world. So essentially, this is what we have for now. If you've never worked with Visual Studio Code, I'm sure you can download one based on your platform and get set up. It's a very simple setup. When you install it, you're going to land on this page, essentially. So, there are a couple of things that we need to set up before we go very far. We need to first initiate our project. So we'll call it npm install or initialize. Right. So the first thing that we want to do is to run this command, npm init. We can even run it with -y. So -y, basically what it will do is, instead of you answering questions, it will just automatically put something together and then you'll be good to go. Perfect. So that generates this package.json. A very simple thing. We will definitely come in here to update a few things, but for now, just take note of this. The next thing is I want to build some form of folder structure. This folder structure, it's not really necessary, but it's always a good idea to have some form of structure when you're working. And then this, based on my experience, has worked. In particular, you can find this in Adonis.js if you have worked with it, or else Laravel kinda has some form of structure like this as well. So there are a number of these places where you can find, and you can also find structures in GitHub repos. Without wasting much of your time, let's get deep into it. The first one is going to be the app directory. We're going to keep a couple of things that are relevant to the app in here. First thing is we can put controllers here. And the second thing is we can put the services. We can also put models in here. I'll explain how these work. For now, we're going to keep it like this. Outside of this, I can have maybe a config folder. We'll get to this as well. Then after this, we can have maybe a routes folder. This is perfect. Now, we might increase the setup. We might add one or two things, which is totally fine. Or else, let's get right onto it. The very first thing that we want to do now is we want to set up our Express. What do I mean by that? You'll find that this is a bare minimum app, and the folder structure that we have created does not do anything currently. So what we want to do is to install a number of packages, including Axios, .env, Express, and Sequelize. Essentially, we want to run this command. Of course, without the right there. This command, essentially, we're going to install Axios. Axios is what's going to allow us to then make those external calls to the pokeapi. .env is going to read from the .env file, where we're going to store sensitive data. We don't want to store this along with the repo. You'll understand soon. Then we're going to install the main player, which is Express, which is going to be the core of our application. Alongside the core of our application, we have Sequelize. This is going to interact with our database. It might take a while, so depending on your internet connection. Perfect. Nice. All right. So now we begin to work on what we want to focus on. The very first thing is we want to create a new file. We're going to call this, let's say, app.js. This is our core application. In this application, we will set up a number of things. Firstly, let's begin by importing. Import, the first thing that we're going to import is going to be the .env /. config. So this will enable us to be able to then interface with our env variables. We'll get to those in a moment. The second one is we're going to import our express. Then for now, this is what we're going to have. We will come back to this one, but then we can go down a bit and do a couple of things, right? The first thing is we want to initialize our express. This initializes our express. Then the next thing that we can do is we can then go down to creating our application. We're going to add more configs shortly. So we want it to listen to a specific port or else default to 3000, and then we want to put a callback. Essentially, in this callback, let us make it a code block. In this code block, we're going to then have our error. If there is an error, what we want to do is basically we want to console log that error. We may add a bit of text to explain what is happening. Otherwise, if there is no error, we can continue and say this server is running on this particular port 3000. But at this point, we're hard coding, even though at this point we are extracting our env value. So let's work on getting our env values. Const port is equal to, let's make all caps, is equal to process dot env port. Right. So essentially what we're saying is we're going to get this variable from the env. If this value is empty, then the default is going to be 3000. Essentially, we no longer need to write it like this here at the bottom. We can remove it and put our port straight there. So that works. The next thing is we're going to use string literals, and then we're going to make sure that we log out that variable port, which is cool. The next thing is we would like to add a way for Express to be able to use JSON when we are communicating with the server. So this is what we'll do. We wanted to use it like this. The next part is going to be us setting up a route of sorts. Now we can set this route in any way that we want. Essentially, we want to build this file called let's call it pull route so that it's easier to remember what it's about. Pull route. And then the next one is going to be our Pokemon route.js. We'll come back to here and we need to import those files. Currently they are empty, but we'll get to it. And then the next one, we didn't make that plural, that's okay. So these are the routes that we're working with. The next thing is we want to tell Express that we want those routes to be the ones that are in use. How do we do that? We're going to say app.use we're going to call the routes for pulling pull. Essentially what this means is you can have let's say it's going to be a domain, like here they have it as pokeapi. Let me just copy that and show you. By putting this pull here as a string, sorry about that. By putting that pull there, essentially what we're saying is this route goes through pull, and then whatever is inside that file that we're going to talk about is then going to come in here. But essentially the way that we build that route is going to be like this, but we're not done yet. Now this pull is going to then use the pull routes. Our pull is not plural as well, so we'll do it like that. And then our file starts with the capital, that's good. Now we will do the same thing as well. In this case, we're going to use Pokemon route, and then here we're going to then call it Pokemon as well, the Pokemon route, capital at this point. Alright, so this is okay. The next thing is we need to come in here in the routes to essentially set up what these routes are going to look like. So if we start off with the pull route, what we will do is we will come in and import from router which is from Express. We're not doing services yet. And then here we're going to import something that we haven't created yet. So this might be a little bit tricky, right? But we'll get back to this shortly. So essentially what are we saying here? We're importing this pull controller from where it's nested here. Essentially we're getting out of this router the routes folder using that, and then we're coming to the controller. We want to come to the app first, and then we come to the controllers. Then after that we'll come to pull-controller.js. Essentially this file we need to then create here. So we come in here in the controllers folder, create the file, name it pull-controller.js. We're telling the router that this is where the code that deals with that route resides. we will further create another file as well to help this so that we keep the code clean. Before we do that, let's continue building this thing. The next part is we need to initialize our router. So we initialize our router, creating it like this, where essentially we create a variable and we initialize it there. Now we need to get cards. So something like router.get, the suggestion is good as well. You can use that, or you can type it out depending on what you're comfortable with. At times it's nice to be able to count, to type it out. At times it's easy, it's more convenient to use these suggestions if they work for you. Remember, you can easily inherit bugs by just taking all of these suggestions along. So now remember what we were talking about when we said we're going to navigate right through from, for example, let's say this is our domain. Let's take our domain and let's come to our file here so that you can further explain this thing. This is our domain. We're going to call this poll, then /. Now to get here, you're going to then use cards. So this is how we're going to invoke the next function that we're going to put here. What is the function? The function is going to come from this poll controller. Let's call it poll data. And then the function can be get cards. So get cards, essentially, if we come and see here, it's going to come and get all this result array, which has currently 1,302 items. So that is what we'll be getting using this endpoint, the whole thing, starting from HTTPS and then including this side. So that is going to be the full path name, but we'll get to it in a few. Right now, we'll remove this. Okay, to make it easy, let's just say pull data across. Right, now we've got some uniformity. Rename this pull data controller. That's perfect. Now, having done this way, if we start the application now, it's going to fail. Remember, we have told it that it has this function inside, but we haven't created this function yet. So this is what we have to work on now next. In here, essentially what we want is, let's just add a couple of lines. Essentially what we want is to be able to get the data, but structure is important. It's not just about writing code that works, but the structure. I always like to create these tags in the controllers and services, essentially for my comments, or rather for my logs. You'll understand more on logs if you've never worked with logs, but I'm sure you've got an idea what logs are. So I'll just show you how I tend to use this. And then this is going to essentially be the poll data controller, the name of the controller. This controller, essentially what it is it's a class. This class is called poll data controller. Same with the file name. It doesn't have to be, but I kind of prefer it to be like that. Alright, so we come here, we create, you see the suggestions are coming left, right, and center. We can export default as it has given us here. However, I want to export the instance of it. So essentially what it will do is I want that instance. So I wanted to create a new instance when I call it. Now, from this point, I can then create a function inside the class. Let's call this, okay, we can take the suggestion. However, this is not where we'll be doing this. I'll get rid of that. I just want the empty function. This is going to get our cards. We're going to define how we get all these, but for now, we want that. What we'll do is we'll create an empty try catch. In here, if there is an error, we basically want to throw it. With an H. The next thing is we want to console log. This is where you see the magic of the tag. Here we're going to then put our tag name. Essentially, this is what I prefer. Again, it's an empty one. Essentially, this is what I prefer, to have the tag here. If we leave this like this, what it's going to log out is literally what is typed here. But what we want is the value of that tag. To get it, we need to make it a string literal. Like that. Now you can see the color has changed, showing that it's now a variable. We're accessing the value there. So, something like this. So when we come here into this function, you're going to see this console log. I'll show you shortly how that's going to look. Essentially, we want to be able to get the card details. But for clean code, we want to separate between what the simple steps of this business logic, what they're going to be, and the actual implementation of it. So this is why you will find that controllers work side by side with services. The next thing that we need to build is a service. We're going to call a service that's going to have a function called, it can be any name, but we'll show you just now. So we're going to come here and then we're going to add, let's call this pull data service. Any name works, but this works for me as well. Pull data service. In here, we're going to do something very similar to what we did previously. What are we starting with? We're going to make sure that we've got our tag, and we're going to make sure that we've got our class. Couple of lines there. Const tag is equal to, we're going to call it pull data service. The next thing is we're going to set up the class. Class is going to be called pull data service. It doesn't have to be, but that is what I prefer. The last part of it is going to be the part where we export. We want to export default, and then we're initializing the class like that. Make sure it's spelled correctly. Alright, that's perfect. In here, we're going to name a function. Let's make it an async function, and let's call it, I don't know, maybe pull, and this is going to pull, and it's also going to process. Pull, process, process data. Perfect. All right. In here, we're going to have our try catch. We'll take the suggestion. We want it empty, that's fine. And we're going to throw the error. All right. So this is what we have set up. Why is it async can only be used in TypeScript? No, that's not true. Anyways, we'll sort it out in a second. Now we come in here. We will want to import that. We want to import the pull data service, and then it will go in and get that data service. When we initialize that data service, when we come here, we're going to call it. When we call the application, the method, we're going to say new. We're going to say await, and then we can process the data. We don't need to pass the request and response to it. Something like this. We may add one or two things before we go far. Now, give me a second. I need to check what this is. Sync. Oh, I see the issue. Perfect. All right. So it needs to be a function, and then we should be able to sort it out. Here we can just return nothing, but make sure that we console log what the name of that function is. The tag is going to tell us what file is it in. In this case, it's going to be in the pull data service file. So yes, so we should continue from here. Now, I want us to try and run this, but before we do, we come to our app. Remember that we called this route, and then we had to set up the controller. We had to set up the service. Just to bypass this, I'm going to comment out these two, just to make sure that everything is fine so far. And then I'm going to, before we run this, I'm going to come here. I'm going to check what scripts I have. In this case, I've got main as index.js. I can make that app.js, same as where my server resides, which works fine. The next part is going to be us basically setting up scripts. So what are scripts? This is what's going to enable us to, there is a suggestion to start. Let's say we want to start the application. There are a number of ways. We can type this directly as it is, node app.js. That should work. For example, if we say node app.js, perfect. Now, this tells us a number of things. It's not happy with the way that we set up our .env. We need to go back and have a look at why it's not happy. Okay. Type module, let's see. Okay, let's make our implementation module based and try again. All right, perfect. Pull data service. It's having troubles with our pull data service. So we come in here, we're saying go back and try and find pull data service, which should be fine, unless we need the path name, the file name .js, the extension. All right, let's try this out. So this is the part about development, where you can set up things and then now you have to debug a couple of errors if you do have them. With time, you'll realize that you'll have a few of these, but for now, that's okay. Let's take a step at a time and figure out why it's happening. Import pull route from routes. All right. Let's come to our app. We come here and we say from routes, file pull route .js, the same name. That's good. Oh yes, we need to be able to come in here. It's expecting this to be a module, but we didn't provide an export. So we need to export our router. Just like this. If we do it like this, then let's try again and see if there's something that, okay, perfect. All right, so we're able to get our application running on port 3000. We're not done yet. We haven't really checked if our endpoint works. We also need to build up and just set up the bare bones of the next controller. What could make it easy for us now is because we've got essentially the structure for what the controller looks like when it doesn't have anything. What we can do now is we can go back and uncomment that route. This one, the poke route. So just to show you, if I try and run this, it will fail at this point because we haven't built these. So we need to put this route and make sure that it has stuff in it. And then from there, we'll also build on and go to the controllers and so on and so on. So here, we're going to import router from, Express. And then the next thing is we're going to import Pokemon controller. Okay, your suggestions are quite nice, even though that Pokemon controller is not yet there. The next thing is we want to initialize our router. I'm sure you may be wondering why I'm able to get these suggestions. Essentially, with this AI, the advent of AI, there's Codium, which is really working well for me. It's a free platform, so I'm able to get these code suggestions. It makes me work a bit faster, which is quite nice. So let's continue. Or how to get it, you come here to extensions and just look for it, and then you'll be able to find it. At times though, it suggests crazy things, which is not what you want to type. And then now our router, we're going to create a post. It will make sense why very soon. So in this post, we're going to call it cards. And then this post is going to come to Pokemon controller. And then this is going to get our cards, essentially. But we're not done yet. We want to export that router at the end. So this is what the code looks like now. We're just saying that when you land on this route, we're pushing you to this function, which is in this controller. And this controller, we get it from here. This is the next part that we're getting to. We need to set up this file. To make life easy, I'll just copy over the one that we have already set up there. And then what I will do is I'll come in here and just take the controller name. It will make sense in a second. So Pokemon controller, and I'm going to make sure that the name of this file is Pokemon. Essentially, I changed here, and the export. Not really necessary to have it named like this. The naming is not too relevant. The most important thing is the convention that I use makes sense to me when I'm looking at the logs. I'll show you the logs when we start to run and make API calls. But for now, we're going to do this. And then the function that we say we're going to check is the get cards. The next thing that we want to set up, similar to how we've got the pull data service, we want to make sure that we've got a particular service for our get cards here. Let's see, what can we call it? Pokemon service makes more sense. So this app currently is essentially empty. So this file, let's copy it and we can rename it Pokemon service. Yes. Get the name and then we update. Perfect. We've got it updated at this point. We can go to the Pokemon controller and just make sure we update instead of the pull service. Remember, we copied this across. I do not fully advise that you copy stuff. If you're not yet familiar to how this thing is set up. Unless you're familiar to the coding, just stick to trying to type it out. You can pause and type out, but if you are sure about the copying and pasting, because at times you may forget, you keep on updating the one file, and you do not want to do that, especially when you are when you're working for an enterprise company. So yeah, just a bit of heads up there. But essentially, a lot of this dev work is about copy paste. I'm not saying go steal people's code. This is what you're typing. This is your code. You can copy and extend as much of your code as possible. With time, you're going to have a lot of these repositories where you've got code for ABC, fetch data in a folder, and things like that. And you don't want to start from scratch. You can start the copy it and then adjust it as you go. So just word of advice there, be careful. If you're new to coding, just chill a bit, type it out. It's necessary pain. Okay. Perfect. So before we go further, let's try and see if our app works. Alright, so nothing is crashing now. The next thing that we want to do, remember, in our package.json, we said we can use this start. How you can go about this is you can type npm run start. So if you want to run these scripts, you can have as many as you want. If you want to run it, you tell npm, and then you tell it to run, and then you tell it which script to run. The script that I'm going to run here is called start. If I enter here, you'll find there it is. Now, I can keep on doing this, but if I make it some changes within the code, I won't be able to see my changes live. So what I want to do is, if I make changes, I want it to update the running code without me getting deep into how all of that is set up. So what we want to do is, we're going to install a package that will allow us to do that, and we're going to add the script for that package, and then we'll be good. So it's called npm install nodemon. This package allows us to be able to do what I just said, where you start it once, and each time I update, it takes that and hot fixes the running application. So yeah, think of it as a hot swap offsets. Right. Now what you can do is, we can come here and say dev. This is when we're running dev. So you are going to then get this. Perfect. Now, if I say npm run dev, what it will do is, you see, nodemon takes over, and then nodemon is checking the application. If I make updates, it's going to update this. It's going to restart it, essentially, and make sure that my changes appear here. So that's good, but for now, let's chill a bit. We're going to get back to it. The next thing that we want to deal with is, we want to bring in our database. Do we start with the database or Axios calls? Let's start with the database, which is alright. So remember, when we installed this, we installed Sequelize. So with Sequelize, we want to be able to basically configure it in such a way that it works for us. Sequelize, if we come and check it out, so this is Sequelize. If you've never worked with it, it's quite simple, but it gets complicated in the deeper you go, like any other platform, you know. So if you come here and say getting started, it will tell you how to install. We've already installed this, so that's fine. The next thing is, you can actually install the other dependencies, right? So for example, if we want to do for Postgres, we may want to do this, right? And copy that line of code and paste it. If you're working with MySQL, you're then going to work with this, and so on and so on. So essentially, this is what we want to set up, right? We'll have to come here. Alright, whilst that is installing, we're going to continue checking this documentation. So here they show you then how you can set it up, how you can get it working, and just a couple of things, how to test for the connection, if you want to see if you're connected or not. You can continue checking it out, coming down here. Then after that, you've got a couple of basic concepts there, but we will get to it. Essentially, I wanted to check this thing out. So this is how you can also connect, and you can have your host and your dialect. Your dialect being essentially what DB you're using. So in our case, we selected Postgres. That's what we're going to be using. It should be done by now. let's come to our config. In our config, we are going to then add a file. This file can be called anything. I choose to call it database .js, not JC, JS. Now, firstly, we want to import our SQLize. Right, we import that from SQLize, and then the next thing is we want to set up a couple of things. Essentially, remember that we can set up a number of these things in the env. So to do it, let's put the variables. Let database be equal to process.env.database. Maybe let's do all caps like that, and then let username okay, I like that. Essentially, this is what we want. We want to get the database, we want to get the username, we want to get the password, we want to get the host, we want to get the dialect. We could actually also use the port, but not quite today. Anyways, so now we can then initialize our Postgres DB. So we can put it in a variable, const, and then Postgres DB is equal to this could work, but I'll just leave out the port for now, just defaulting to that port. Now the next thing is we need to export. Default, and then we can make it an object and Postgres DB. Right, so this is how we can set it up. The next part is for us to communicate with this and the DB. We're going to then create models. What are models? Essentially, think of it as they carry the schema or the structure of your tables. We're going to give them specific names for the different columns, and then we're going to then tell it to come and grab this connection that we just set up here, and then that will allow it then to communicate with our DB. And then when we want to use or add data from the DB, what we'll do is we'll then use the services to connect to it. So that is the overall plan around this, having that structured approach. The first thing is come to models. Let's create the Pokemon. Alright, the Pokemon. Let's call it .js. What you will notice is, in as much as names are not too necessary, they are very much unique, right? But everything that deals with, let's say, the Pokemon side of things, we've got the Pokemon, we've got the Pokemon service, we've got the Pokemon controller. There is some form of consistency. it's going to be the same as where we've got like the pull data, even though for models we're not going to have a pull data model. You'll understand because the service is going to use the Pokemon and the next model that we're going to set up. But don't worry about that, we'll get to it just now. And then the next thing is we're going to import sequelize, or rather, let's destructure this. We're going to import, do we want sequelize? But I know we want data types. The sequelize not as much, unless if we want to set up the connection here. We can import the database from, we're going to go out of this, and then we're going to go out of the app folder. We're going to come to the config, and then we're going to go to the database file. Perfect. We're going to get the database from there. The next thing is we're going to create basically this model. Const Pokemon is equal to database dot Postgres DB. Remember, this is what we created here, so we're accessing the Postgres DB. So there is our Postgres DB. Now that we've got the connection, we need to then set it up. We want to define, let's open this. What are we defining? Then this is going to be our name, and then essentially it's almost close but not quite, so I'll just close this off and then we open it so that you can type it on our own. Well, we've got name, and then here we're going to open, and then we're going to put the type. The type of the name is going to be, let's make it a text. Like that. And then we can tell it to, oh nice, we can tell it not to allow now. And then the next thing is going to be the URL. If you've been following closely, you'll notice that these are the same as what we had initially in the pokeapi, where we had the name and the URL. So all of these entries are going to be individually stored using this model. Now the next thing is, again, we're going to put the type, and then it's going to be text. Allow now, again, let's just say false. You can make it true, which works as well, but let's keep it like this. We'll see how that works. The next part is, if you're starting your application, you may want to basically synchronize without having to create the database or the tables on your own. The model can create the tables for you as long as the connection is correct. So instead of just saying, let's say maybe export default Pokemon like this, before that, what we'll do is we're going to say Pokemon.sync, and then this essentially is going to then start the process. Then what we want to do is console log. Then let's open that. Perfect. So this is going to happen each time. So if the table is not there, what it will do is it's going to create a table for you. So that works as well to your advantage. The next thing is we want to do something similar as well to the details. So I will probably just let you try and figure out some of the details you can use that you can use. For example, if you go to this particular endpoint as it is, you paste it here, you're going to get a huge JSON file. This is all the data that is in there. I know I'm moving very fast. If you hold Control and select A, you can then Control C, copy it, come to JSON viewer.stack.hu, or else just look for JSON viewer on Google, and then it will give you a couple of options. And then if you paste it in here, what you'll be able to do now is you can then come to, you can say format, it will format it for you. If you come to the viewer, it will show you the structure. So essentially this is the structure that you have, that you can work with. So that's a cool thing. So for now, we're going to kind of pause a bit here, and then let you create the next model. So the model is going to be PokemonDetails. I want you to try and figure out what column names we can use for the PokeDetails, and then we'll pick it up from there in a second. I guess at this point it's just going to be a switch, but yeah, we will be back at this. Okay, for now, let us continue with where we were. I hope you managed to set something up, but if you didn't, don't feel bad. We'll get to it together. Alright, so essentially what we want is to set up the PokemonDetails. If you wanted, you can actually copy this. For the most part, the way that this is structured is going to be similar, but to get you hooked up, let's continue by creating it. PokemonDetails.js, that's the file we want to create. And then in here, we want to import. Remember, we started by importing the data types. Data types. And then after this, we want to get our database. Import database. Alright, that's cool. Import. Alright, we don't want it to be all caps. The next thing is we want to then create const PokemonDetails. Alright, let's type it out so that we get used to this. PokemonDetails. And then this is going to be equal to database dot Postgres DB, which is our connection string that we set up in our database.js file. And then here we want to define and then we're going to give this property a name. Essentially this is going to be the database table, Pokemon_details. And then after this, we want to essentially put the object that's going to be the schema just here, right? So the first thing that we want to do is, when we create a record in Pokemon, it's going to essentially have an ID. And then we want to take that ID and we want to put it in the details so that we can be sure that that detail corresponds to that Pokemon. So we can call it Pokemon_ID. And then this, we need to give it a data type, which is and then this is going to be an integer. Yes, allow now, false, we don't want it to be null. And then the next field that we want, so if you remember the pokeapi, depending on how you look at it, we've got this set up like this. If you look for a specific Pokemon like this one, you'll find there are a number of fields that we can use, but just to make it a little bit easier for us, some of these details we're not going to use at all. One of the things that we're going to pick up is we're going to come in here, and then we're going to come to the sprites. We're going to grab a number of these images, essentially the front, I guess maybe the default front, and maybe the front shiny. I'm not sure about the backs if we want to take those, but that could work as well. Let's just see if there's something else that we can put, that we can get here. Okay. We've got, oh nice, we've got species, we've got the name of the species, right? That could work. We've got the weight. Okay, that can work. Probably a height, yes, that can work as well, right? I think that would essentially sum it up. So just to make it easy, remember that we said we're going to have essentially all those images, from species name to the shiny back, shiny front. So what I'll do is, I've already got those set up. Essentially, let's go down and see. We've got the species name, which is going to be a text. We've got the front shiny. Remember that this is like text string with the address. That's fine. We just want the address of the image. That's all. We can save that as text. That works as well. So we've got front shiny, back shiny. We've got front default, back default. In the front end, that's where we can figure out whether we're going to use the back or we're just going to use the front. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes and how much time is there. And then we've got the back default. We've got the weight. This can work like this as well. It's fine. We've got the weight. We've got the height. Right? These are numbers, so you can say integer. That's fine. That works as well. The next thing that we want to set up, if you remember well, is we want to make sure that Pokemon details dot sync. Alright, okay, cool, that works as well. So essentially what we want is to get that sync function, then after it finishes, to synchronize, basically to create the table. If it's not there, it's going to tell us that the table has been created. And then we need to export default PokemonDetails. This works as well. Now that we've got this, we can now work on, let's say, our pull controller. Let's go to our pull flow and see how everything works. If you would like, you can actually close the other files so that it doesn't confuse you, but it works for me. So the good thing about this is it's, in essence, it's actually done here. But what I can do, if I hold Option Shift, I can bring that down, and I hold Option and down, I can bring it there. And then this can be a log line that says finished processing. And then when it finishes processing, we want it to send a result. So response dot send, and then we can say finish processing. So essentially it's just going to send, give us that text that says finish processing after it finishes. So in essence, we're done with this controller. We should be done with it. If we come to the pull data service, this is where we still need to do a bit of work. To begin off, remember that we need to pull the data using Axios. We also need to put it in the DB. So we will need our models to bring our models in so that we can put in the DB. We also need to call Axios so that we are able to make that request to get the data. So if we import Axios from Axios, we import Pokemon from the models. We can also import Pokemon details, which is the Pokemon details from models. So essentially what it means is we're in this folder for services. So ... means we're closing that folder, and then when we close it, we're now in this line. So we can select anything that is here, models, controllers, they're in the same field or level. So we select the models, and then from there we can select Pokemon details. So essentially that is what it means there. Hopefully it doesn't confuse anyone. Now there are two parts in terms of getting this data. The first one is that we need to come here. The first one, we go and get the elements, right? All of them. The second part is we're going to get the details of these. So it means the first function is going to get the elements, and then we need another function that's going to process these and get the individual data. So essentially, the structure is going to kind of be the same as this one. So we can copy that. Be it laziness or creativity, you be the judge of that. So essentially this is going to be get, let's say, card details, right? If we get the name and then we put it here, yeah, we're good to go. Now we need to do something. When we come here, it returns without processing. So what we want to do is to be able to process this. So get rid of that. The first thing is we're going to const, let's get the data. Now we're going to call Axios. You will see destructor so that we get data. So it's going to be await Axios dot get. Then this is going to be the Axios basically. It's almost similar to what we have there, but I don't want to just paste it like this. I want to show you how and where we get it from. So the API, in order to get the data, the first element is going to be that one. Copy that, come in here, and then you put it there. Now we have to get what comes after that. What we want is this one that gives us everything, right? So remember, we need to get that, copy it, and then we come here. At the end of that, we need to paste it. When we paste, just make sure that the address is correct. The only place where we've got double slashes is there after the HTTP or HTTPS. So after that, there should be the singular forward slashes. So this should be good. Now we're going to get this data. Now when we get this data, we want to do essentially two things. We want to loop through each and every element in here. We want to get that value, the value of the name and the URL. Using the name and the URL, we want to be able to store in the Pokemon table. And then using that URL, we want to be able to go and get the extra card details, and then we're going to then store those details in the PokemonDetails. So in order to start, so essentially we're going to do a for loop here. This for loop, remember that when we come here, this is the result of it. Let's view it as a raw thing. You see, now this is a JSON object. This JSON object has got this field, which is results. So this is what we want to loop that field called results. Now we can call for and then maybe let's have a for off. I think we can work with that. That works. Const, you can actually have something for iterator, but we'll get to that. Here we're going to go with data dot result. We're going to go with data dot result. This hopefully is going to get us the looping data. Now, what do we want to get here? Remember, this thing only has two things. It has the name and it has the URL. That is what it has. We will talk about how we're going to then forward everything else. But now we need to save the Pokemon data. In order to save the Pokemon data, we basically have to and use to await for a method that is there in Sequelize for this model. Pokemon created is equal to await. Perfect. Well, we want to await Pokemon.find or create. So this is what we want to do. And then we open the braces and the bracket. So where what? We want to find where the name and the URL. So if this name and URL are there, we want to be able to to get or else we're also going to default this name URL like that. So this should work. So essentially this is going to create this Pokemon object right here. Right, welcome back. So let us continue to finishing this thing. So after we've basically created or verified that that entry is there in the DB, what we want to do is we want to call this function. And the way to do that, we're going to use this dot get card details. Now what do we want to pass in here? We want to pass in the URL, which we're going to use to go and get the extra details. And then we also want to pass the Pokemon ID, right? And then this Pokemon ID, we get it from this Pokemon. So it's going to be like this, Pokemon ID, exactly like that one. But we're going to wrap everything in these curly braces. So this should be the way to call it. The next part around this would be, we need also to get the details. So we need to get these details. In order to get these details, what we'll do is we're going to say const, and then we'll destructure data, similar to how we did it at the top there. And then we're going to await exactly as it suggests. We're going to wait our xus.get, and then we put the URL that we get here. That comes alongside name and URL. So we're getting this value, and then that is the value that we're going to push in. So we get that, and we're going to get the data. When we get the data, however, now we need to drill in and get something out of it. We can say const, based on the structure, we can access sprites directly here. We can access the weight directly here. We can access the height, and then we can access the species. And then all of this, we get it from the data property there. We are also going to call set up the const. What are the variables we're putting? Is going to be backlight or back default, maybe default. That's the first one that I'm thinking. It is suggesting the right ones. Let's say front details. Let's say back shiny. Let's say front shiny. Sprites. And then, so these are the details we're getting from sprites. Remember, if we come to sprites, let's say come here, and then instead of seeing raw JSON, we can come here. You see under sprites, we can find these. So we're trying to access these from sprites. And the species, we've got it here. It's just we've got the name and the URL. And then let's see what else we can do. Species, whilst we're on species, the name. Alright, let's say const species name is equal to species.name, like that, which should be fine. So now we should do something similar to this, where we find or create, right? So what are we finding? We can literally find by everything and create by everything. That's fine. Const, and then here we've got two properties. The Pokemon details created is equal to await Pokemon details dot find. Oh wait, find or create. That is what we want. Let's open and close that, and then where essentially we're going to then open it up like this, where we want remember we're passing in here the URL and the pokeapi. Let's just grab that and put it in here, then remove the value that we put there. Perfect. So it's something like this. If you like as well, you can actually copy this as it is and paste it here so that we can log it out. It has no sensitive data, so we can actually work with it like this. If there is sensitive data, you do not want to just console log everything. So if you've got passwords in there, personal information, email, numbers, you might not necessarily want to just log it out everywhere like this. So essentially you don't want to log personal information. Now when you've got this, we can then put the Pokemon ID that we pass in there, right? The species name, we're going to get it there and paste it here, and then we can get our sprites, and then we can get our weight and height. We can copy the whole thing here and put a comma afterwards. Then here we're going to call it defaults, and we can put the whole string, the whole thing there. So essentially what it will do is similar to up there. It's going to get, if that entry is there in the DB, it's not going to update it. It's only going to create if it doesn't find it. What we do with the result, we don't have to do anything at this point. Yeah, we can let it pass like this. I think we should be good with our first part of getting the data. Let's try and see. npm run dev. Alright, let's see. Okay, alright, that's fine. Pokemon, we forgot the extension. There might be ways of getting around the extensions, but at least for now, let's just get it out of the way. We're using the database. Probably it's in one of these files, database.js. Probably here as well. Oh, that one is fine. Okay, let's see if it starts. Database process.env.database. Okay, process. Alright, that's cool. Now what we need to do is, let's go to the database config file, And then let's see here. Should we or should we not? Okay. All right. Let's see how to resolve this. Okay, so let's see this process. Okay, proceeds. Okay, there's a typo there. Okay, perfect. Dialect needs to be explicitly supplied. All right, that's fine. Let's see. Let's go to our sequelize. Okay, so the thing is, we've got these values set here. We need to come in here and set up in a file in root folder, create .env there like that. For now, I'll just paste it like this, and then I'll just remove those. You can then put your details here. You make it put equal signs to make these variables. Right, now you can actually put values against these just to make sure that everything is fine. Database, let's call it pokeapi underscore tutorial. Username, I'm using these details. It's my local, so there's nothing you can do with this one. And the password doesn't have to be this plain. Definitely don't use password for your passwords, even in local, so that you don't get used to this thing. Localhost, dialect, let's say Postgres, right? So essentially, if I do it like this, because I can also set up .env .ignore. Essentially, what I can do is I bypass this file, so that the values that I have in my local will never be pushed to the code base. So that's going to go a long way, and also we can keep these values from being shared across. So whoever or wherever the values have to be, they will be in that one place. Increases security. So for your different staging environments or production environments, you can set up these different values. Okay, let's see if this will work. Let's stop it and start it. All right, this dialect is not supported. Postgres, let's see. All right, perfect, that's a different one. So in it, we've got an issue. It's saying that this database does not exist. That's good. So if we take the name of the database and come in here, we come to databases. What we can do is, if you right click, you can create a database. We can just put the name here, not much to do, and save it. So I'm using pgadmin4 here to just have a look at all of these. So these are the different databases that I have. So that's for the pokeapi. So let me stop this and let's start it. You see, when it starts, it comes in and it starts to check create table if not exist, that, and then that is the whole synchronizing that the syncing that we were talking about. So now if I come into my database and I look for my schemas, I look for tables. If I come to Pokemons and then let's see, come to scripts, select script. All right, let's run this. You can see I've got a table that has got that. I can even check in terms of the structure and all, but it just got the ID, name, URL, created it, updated it. That works. So that's perfect for now. Let's keep it edit. Now we've got essentially an endpoint to pull. So now what we want to do is we want to be able to go to, all right, so I've got this thing that I use here, Thunder Client, which we can actually set up. Essentially this is an extension. You can come and check for it in extensions. It's called Thunder Client, as you can see the name there. Come here and say new request. It works like Postman or anything that can process your requests. That works as well. So for now, what I need to do is I need to local host port, is it 3000? Port 3000. We called it pull cards. We have to verify that. So how do we verify that? We come here, we say up, we call this route pull, which is fine. We've got the pull set up. The next one, we come to the pull route, we called it cards. So we're just going to come and say pull cards and see if it returns anything. So there it is. You see our pull controller had started and it said get cards, and then our pull service was initiated as well to pull process data, and then now our pull data controller says it has finished getting the cards. So that was rather very quick. I suspect something didn't go well there. But the first thing that we can check is we can come here and check if we've got any data. Nope, we do not have any data. So what exactly happened here? We said pull data, it comes in here and it should go in and pull this data, process data. We actually call pull process data the service. Pull data service. So there is our pull process data. We do console log pull process data at this point. The first thing is we come here and in this loop, okay, let's do this before we go very far. It could be my network. All right, let's console log the data that we get here, just to be sure of what we're getting. And before we do anything else, let's close the other, close to the right. Perfect. All right, we can actually close all of them besides this one. So we want to verify that this works well. Send this. Okay, so that's cool. we do get some data out. Results are in. Now for const this of that, okay, we now have to figure out why is it not processing the way that we want it to. What could be the case? We get the values there. Oh, I see. So okay, so you see typo, we left s here. Alright, just a small thing. Alright, so if we connection was refused by server, let's see, did we stop it or it started? Alright, created the table, tried. Alright, so you can see there's something that is happening here, but there seems to be an error of sorts. Create or replace function. Now we have to figure out what this is. Returns record as a function. Unique violation, get stacked diagnosis. Alright, that's fine. Let's see. Before I check this, I need to be able to see if we updated anything. Alright, that's perfect actually. What I'll do is, okay, let's see this as well. Scripts, select. Alright, so this one does not have. So probably there's something that we're missing at that point. We need to figure out unknown attributes, Pokemon ID and front underscore details. So we have to take these and come in here and check. Firstly, Pokemon ID, we do put it there, and then it's Pokemon ID and front details. Front details, that's fine. So let's check front details. Is it front details or default back front? Okay, front default. Front default. Okay, we're going to take front default and sorry about that. We're going to get front default, and then the next thing that it's crying about has to do with this pokeapi. This Pokemon API, this Pokemon ID, Poke ID, Pokemon ID. We have to make sure. Oh yes, now I see the issue. It doesn't have an E at that point. So what we'll have to do is to delete. We can, yeah, let's just delete this, and then here as well, let's delete, and then let's come across and check. Alright, perfect. So now we can come in here and try and try the requests. Okay, so now this seems to be working, but let's verify before it finishes. We need to be able to check this thing. We can refresh the databases, and then we come to the tutorial, schemas, public. Let's check the tables, and then let's check the details. Okay, so it seems like it has finished. We need to check if the database has all the records. To do that, I'll go to pgadmin 4. Hopefully I can, yes, we can see that. So if we run details, we'll be able to see, yes, there it is. This means our data imported properly. Now, the next thing that we need is we need to be able to pull our data. So far, what we've been able to do is basically put all the data. We fetched the data and pulled it from the pokeapi. We need to grab all that data now using an endpoint, basically going to be the output of what we have. Now, to do that, maybe let's close this one. Let's close that one. We'll come to this requesting sometime, but for now we can close it. The next thing that we want to come to is the Pokemon controller. So this is the part where we're going to be pulling our data, and this calls the Pokemon service. We will get the data from here and also return it to as the response. But before we do that, there's something that we need to set up. When we fetch data, there are variables that we probably might want to set up, probably we might not, but we'll set them up just now, just in case. So we've got const page, and then for this one we can actually pass it as int, and then if it's empty, we're going to then have the value of 1, right? We're going to do the same thing with limit. So limit, this means the number of items per page. We're also going to say something similar. The other thing that we can also do is, depending on the setup, we can create this offset variable. So what it will do is essentially it's going to take like from what index, but then we'll see play along in a second. So we're going to take all of our entries. We're going to put the page, we're passing the page, the limit, the offset, Then after that, we can console log something, get cards, just to show that we're finished processing. And then after that, we can send back something, but we do not want to send back this string, as it's not our data. What we want to send is the data itself. So we're going to send response.json, and then we'll put the data element in here. Perfect. So essentially this side should be fine. What we'll do is we'll get all of these arguments, and then we'll go to the Pokemon service. The Pokemon service is right here. Then we'll put them in this function. Now, the other thing that we can do in the meantime is we can actually console log that alongside this information. And the moment we see the console log, we'll be able to tell that, okay, this is the page number and it has been passed properly, right? There are two parts to creating this endpoint. The first part, we want to be able to go and get all the Pokemons, and then after that we can loop. We can use join statements and the likes, but I just want this to be a little bit okay. Let's try and see if we can put everything together. Alright, so very interestingly, if we want to set up a case where we get all the Pokemon and the details, then we need to set up relationships. And the way that I kinda can do it now, at the top of my head, is let's have a file. We'll call this, it doesn't matter the name really, relation or relationship, yes. Maybe relationships .js. Having done this, we'll import our two models that are just there. Good thing is that we're still in the same direction, so the way that we'll import is not too hectic. Import the Pokemon, and I want the Pokemon, this one. We can get the details, we can even get the Pokemon itself. So I just duplicated that line. Right, so we're just importing these two models. Now that we've imported them, the next thing that we'll do is we can say Pokemon has one. So we're just defining the relationships, and has one what? It has one PokemonDetails. Right, and then we have to specify what the foreign key is and all of those details. And this is going to be the foreign. I know it is suggested, but at times it's a little bit easier to set this thing up. The foreign key is going to be, alright, that's fine, we can take it like this. The foreign key is going to be Pokemon ID. Again, these technologies are not very powerful, so remember, their weakness is they can give you something and you think, oh yes, this is a proper suggestion, but you find that it doesn't work for your setup. So you should know how to manipulate certain things. Detail rather. And then we'll do the same thing. And then we'll do this and say as Pokemon. Oh yes, let's make that a string. Pokemon detail. Right. Pokemon detail. That's good. The only difference is we need that. Then that should be well. Now that we have defined the relationship like this, the next thing is we need to be able to come to our application. Give me a second, I need to think about this. It should be the application. Alright, so in here we're going to import and we're going to call that relationship. So import dot app, import dot app and then / we want the models, and then after models we want the relationships. Alright, so this is what we want. And then in our relationships again, we should make sure that we've got .js specified, or else we're going to have errors. So it's compiling. While this is doing that, let's come back to our flow here. Oh, perfect. I like that it is properly compiled, right? So in our setup, we are already logging page, limit, and offset, which is where we start off. So if we say we have landed at this point, we want to have const Pokemons, and then where are we getting this? We are awaiting Pokemon Pokemon.js there. We are waiting that Pokemon.find and count all. And then here we're going to open the bracket and the brace, and then we want to include we want to include the model, and then the model is going to be the Pokemon details, and it imports it at the top. Make sure you've got your JS, right? Pokemon details. Oh, we've got an array at this point. The reason why it's not happy is we've got an array. We create an array here. We need also to open up the object, just like that. Now we don't have that error. Alright, so we come up here, model Pokemon details. Then we want this to be as, remember that we were naming that as for the relationship as Pokemon detail, so we want that to be there as well as Pokemon detail. The next thing is we have put the include. We wanted to include that. We wanted also to have the limit, and then we wanted also to have the offset. Right, so this is how we've got the data. The next part that we'll do is we want to return the data. We could calculate the total number of pages if we want. Something like, let's say, const total pages is equal to math.co. Here we're going to then take our count, or it has suggested almost exactly what we want, but not quite. It's put this data object there. We don't want that yet, right? We take the count and divide it by the limit. And then the next thing that we'll do is we're going to set up the return. When we're setting up the return, okay, let's just remove this in the meantime. What do we want to return? We want to return an object. This object is going to have the data elements, data being Pokemons, and then these are the rows, the actual rows. So this is the actual data that we're working with. The next one is total items. The way that you do this, in terms of whether it's camel case or you use an underscore or something like that, it will depend on your code flow and the consistency. It's very important that you get that consistency in. However you do it, it has to be consistent. I tend to like to do this for functions, the camel case, and put in underscore, but that's fine. We can do this for today. And then we can say current page, and then this current page can just be page. Instead of saying current page, you can pass back the page as is. That works as well. We don't have to stress about it. And then the limit, we can pass it in as it is. So this ensures that our data is going to be sent back in the correct format. The next part that we need to do is, now that our data is set up correctly, we need to be able to go back to our Pokemon controller, and we need to be able to grab that data and send it back. The only difference is in as much as we set up the response for the data is not defined at this point. So the moment we do that, it's going to fail. What we have to do then, we can use a let data be equal to that, and then this should work. How do we access this? Remember, in the app, we've got the /Pokemon there. So what we need to do is we need to then set up our Thunder client. We're no longer using this one. We need to create a new request. With this new request, localhost, we're using localhost 3000, but we're not doing the pull cards. Here we've got Pokemon. It should be cards as well, but in order to make sure that we're doing the right thing, we then have to come in here and look at the route. So we have to look at the Pokemon route. If we look at the Pokemon route, we should be able to see what it is. It's cards. So essentially, this should be our setup. We should be able to then send this and wait for the response. Error cannot get Pokemon. The reason why it's saying this is there are a couple of reasons actually. The first one is that the endpoint is not set up as a GET request. The other part, which is not really the reason for the error, but is something that is required, that could be required if we want to make it a required thing, is at this point we're not really passing anything, right? It's going to default to the values that we put in there. So okay, maybe let's do this. Let's allow our endpoint to fetch as a post Okay, Christ waiting for starting. .john. Okay, where is it? .json, not .john. Yes, I like Jon Snow, but no, not here. Yeah, not here. Perfect. So when you do this, we'll get the response, and we're able to get it in this fashion. When you get the data, look, PokemonDetails is already included. This is because we built that relationship earlier, and we put it in there, so it knows that whenever we fetch that Pokemon, it's going to add it in, as long as we put it in the include section. If we don't want to put it in the include section, then we might have to look into that array and then get back the data. But essentially, this is the complete API. I'll try and link to the GitHub for this API so that you can follow along and it makes life a little bit easier. So yeah, essentially we've been able to get all that data from the Pokemon API. We've been able to bring it into our Express and Postgres setup, and then through that we've been able to then get the data from Postgres and present it to our API as our own API. So this works, and it really helps a lot to be able to do so. Now, current limit is 1. Let's see if we update that. If it's not there, let's do it at 10. Let's see what happens in terms of the response, because previously we've got current page 1, limit 1, total number of pages is 1302 total items, so it's the same thing. But then if we do it this way, what happens is we're able to pick up a number of these. The total number of pages changes now. It's 131, which is a different thing. The limit has changed. So you can see the power of all of this. You can even drive these values based on your front end and change how you then display these items. If you want 5 at a time, you can do that. If you want 100 at a time, you can do that. So it depends on how you are going to implement your front end. And basically what that will entail in terms of your network traffic, how heavy your application is going to be. I think the next part will look at building front end using Next.js. Probably we're going to use Next 14, a basic setup that's going to just take and consume this API data that we have just put together, making it a little bit easier. So essentially, we've made this API a little bit more user friendly, and all that data comes into our system. And yeah, feel free to modify this in any way. Feel free to optimize it. This is not the best setup, and again, it's not the worst setup. So you can have at it. If there are any additions that you have, please reach out. Let's chat about this, and then let's see as things go forward how we make this work. But otherwise, thank you. Cheers. Have a good one.